tax income. Ultimately, property tax, I think especially in our cities, that's a separate issue with state aid flowing down from the state. But those are the issues we need to look at across the board.
I have to challenge you on the 2% decrease on the corporate tax. It's a complete red herring. I think the number was 96% of the corporations in the state pay the absolute minimum as it stands. So wasn't the state basically kowtowing to a group of really, really large companies that pay very little in taxes, for what they get back from the state? I mean, CVS, $14 million of the Jobs Development Act, which is a $15 million fund, and they stand up and want to play economic chicken with the state over maybe cutting that fund in half. And I don't think it's fair. I don't think I'm going to use the word patriotic for them to play chicken with a state like that and pit Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island against one another. I think the whole idea of corporate tax incentives pit states against one another. And if we're going to compete globally, what does that do for our economy as a whole that can compete on a global scale?
Yeah, I generally agree. I don't know the specifics of the CVS situation to that level of detail, but I don't think that can be used as an excuse to just ignore our tax situation and allow them to be out of whack with our neighbors. I really don't. I think that we're in a regional economy here, and we can't be the one outlier.
So how much of this, and I think that this is a really under-touched upon topic, how much does ethics reform have to do with economic development?
Yeah, I think it's got a fair amount to do with it, and I think that it relates to a lot of it is reputational. I think business people like security, they like predictability, and they're all about minimizing risk. And a state where anything can happen because somebody's brother knows somebody and wants to get this done or doesn't want to get this project done, that's an unhealthy business climate. And any executive or manager is going to avoid that like the plague. And I really think that ethics reform, getting some stability and predictability in state government, is what's going to be key here for economic growth.
When you moved the office of your company to Rhode Island, just anecdotally, did you receive any blowback in terms of you're doing what? You're moving where?
No. Well, there was some internal pushback about, well, the Rhode Island economy is very slow. Do we want to do that? The idea was to try to break into a market we weren't seeing success in, because if you're a Massachusetts or Connecticut office of a company and you're coming into Rhode Island and looking for clients, it's like, well, why don't you have a local office? People look for that Rhode Island-based presence, which is understandable to some extent. So we were really seeking that out. But yeah, there was some skepticism, mostly about the slow economy and whether we were going to find jobs here. I think that being said, I think if there certain mayoral candidates, for example, are reelected, there would be those eyebrows raised, like, what the heck are you doing looking to move into that city right now?
What, in terms of the Rhode Island Commerce, formerly known as the Economic Development Corporation, any opinions on that in terms of their approach to business, what they're doing, their viability?
Yeah, we didn't hear anything from them. We reached out to them during the process of exploring our move. I think that they got back to us and offered, some general pamphlet of, here's how we can help. Ultimately, our move was kind of handled at the corporate level within our company, and they kind of did what they wanted to do and didn't get much assistance from Commerce RI.
How many? Let me jump in. How many folks for your company now work in Rhode Island?
I think there are 15 of us right now, full-time and part-timers.
Right. In a growing, and your jobs represent the type of smart, quote unquote, smart jobs, to use the current cliche, that are really
they're green jobs.
Oh, if you don't say so yourself.
No,
they're green jobs.
They're the most desirable jobs that you would want right now. I mean, you're talking about, whether it be administrative in a professional setting, highly educated, hopefully highly compensated individuals. I mean, that's you're what we want, right?
I would think so, yeah, and we're also the type of company that goes and recruits at places like URI and finds engineering graduates. I think we need more of that. It's also, like Dave said, it's a green company.
Sure.
We're working to remediate contaminated properties and bring them back onto the economic rolls, the tax rolls, by helping clients with the technical needs of that process.
So it's a win-win for everyone.
But, you might balk at the term green jobs because it has this,
the cylinder effect.
my party's label over it. And I've said this over and over again. These are companies like yours don't just create jobs in this high middle income sector. They create the jobs for the guys that drive backhoes. They create jobs for secretaries that need to file paperwork with the state. They create jobs throughout the income spectrum.
Yep.
And I think that not enough focus has been given in this state to those businesses that, yourself as an engineer, we need to start having systems-based thinking on the public scale, because laws you pass in the General Assembly affect businesses and people in ways that you may not see when you pass that law. So I think having, more of a systems-based approach to government, so that all of these entities aren't siloed from one another and not communicating, I think that's certainly the way to go for the future.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think that there's not enough perspective on Smith Hill about what this bill specifically does, because a lot of them haven't lived it. They haven't lived the process of running a business, hiring subcontractors. How does this flow down to individual projects around the state? Mm-hmm. I think that's a critical perspective and a big difference between my opponent and I.
So we've determined now that you're an ethically driven jobs creator. This is good.
Thank you.
This is good. What's next on the Ethan list?
Yeah, I think education reform is next on that list. I think particularly Providence Public Schools, both the physical infrastructure of them and the challenges they face within the classroom is something we really need to take a look at. Again, that's something every candidate will say. Ultimately, I'm looking at it from a perspective of, I don't particularly care what the platform for delivering the education is, whether it's a traditional public school or charter. I think there's merits to both. I think the key is measuring progress in both of them. If a charter school is not serving its students well, it needs to be closed. If a traditional public school is not serving students well, we need to look at why and how it can be improved. One thing I'd like to do is a comprehensive review of the 2010 funding formula. There's a lot of data out there on it, and particularly the Rhode Island Department of Education's website, but a lot of it hasn't been refreshed since 2012. So in the past 2 years, I'm not sure we know exactly where we're at as far as, is that money making a difference? Are there cities and towns that are falling behind because they got the short end of the stick, et cetera?
Well, it's interesting to me, whether it be the race to the bottom money, which I guess it was tens of millions of dollars, the new revenue funding model that you talk about, we spend an awful lot of money and time generating data and seemingly spend precious little time analyzing that data. It's almost as if I used to call him, was it McWalters, the predecessor to Ms. Gist, McData, because he was great at just pulling in all sorts of information, and yet we still, and this is, people ask me about the PO taxpayer thing. On a personal level, I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars that, quite frankly, I don't have to educate my children in a private setting because of the sheer utter failure of Rhode Island schools. So it's good to hear that. I don't know that we have to have a didactic single approach. I think you're right. It can be a combination of public, charter, vouchers. This is not a one size fits all.
And I think that in general, that's kind of a failure of our public education system in America as a whole. Is that we're supposed to have this educational system that raises these beautiful thinking individuals, and yet we teach them all in the exact same way. Sit in this desk, look forward, don't make any noise. If anything, our educational system stifles creativity and individualism.
Yeah, and that's one of my fears about the Common Core curriculum.
And that's like just structurally it does that.
Yeah, you mentioned you were about to say about the Common Core.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Common Core curricula. I think it takes away opportunities, like Dave mentioned, for arts, music, etc. I don't think a federalized, top-down approach to an education agenda is appropriate, and I think control over the exact agenda should remain in the hands of the states.
Excellent. You're also pro-legalization, pro-regulation. Tell us about that.
I am, yeah. I jumping back quickly before that, you touched upon generating data versus scrutinizing data. And I think I just wanted to say that's something across state government. We need to look more at that critical analysis step. We're generating data, but we need people that are capable of reading it, looking at it, scrutinizing it. There's not enough of that on Smith Hill. I think I can bring some of that. I'm an engineer trained in that sort of thing. But yeah, jumping back to legalization, I think it's past time that we treat marijuana as alcohol. We legalize it, decriminalize it, regulate it over 21. That's a DUI, strict DUI enforcement. But I think it's time for that.
Do you see the bonanza financial impact that our friends like Jared Moffat would describe, or do you see it really as a way of streamlining the judicial system? What's your take on the whole picture?
I think A, it's the right thing to do. B, it does unclog our prison system, our judicial system from nonviolent, really relatively low level offenders. I'm not really looking at it as a huge economic growth thing. I'm afraid of silver bullet ideas like that, like, oh, we'll be saved if only we do this. But I do think it's the right thing to do at this point in time.
You realize at one point in the Chafee administration, because of a couple of lottery winners, there was a serious analysis as to what potential increase in lottery winners could do to the revenue stream for the state of Rhode Island. That's the type of clear thinking that characterizes our state government. What can you say? Much has been made, and this kind of cycles back to the ethics issues. We allegedly have an ethics commission. They're weak. They're pathetic. All you need to do is say 2 words, Judge Leach, and you understand just how feckless they are. Nice people, I'm sure. Where do you think governmental leaders like administration heads, department heads, legislative support, we seem to have a preponderance of I know a guy insider trading, all right? Where would you pull your people from that you would work with in terms of your legislative support as you rise through the legislature? Do you see that as a problem?
I'm looking forward to being able to make alliances with a variety of folks that share common goals with me. I know there are a number of legislators that are ready for this ethics reform push. It's something that comes up perennially and just gets quashed. So ideally, I'd like to see a number of fellow independents get elected this year and become sort of a caucus that is sought out by other parties, as well as can sort of work together on our own issues as we move through the system, as we move legislation through the system. As far as the Ethics Commission being, feckless and weak, I'm not sure exactly if that's true, but I think we need to look at giving them not only enforcement capabilities but also monitoring capabilities, so that it's not just some citizen happens to care enough to refer an ethical violation to them. I think ideally I'd like to see them able to monitor, scout out these violations themselves and take action.
Where can we find out more information about your campaign?
Sure. So best place to look, I've got all my issues listed on www.ethangiles.com, EthanGyles. I'm also on Twitter at EthanGY, where I'm pretty active. So you go head there, take a look at my issues page, and see if you line up with me. And if you do, I'd appreciate you supporting me on November 4th.
And how can folks contribute to your election?
Well, there's a donate tab on EthanGiles.com as well.
Have you done much fundraising? Have you? I applaud, by the way. One of the focuses of this show has been the recurring loss of good talent for people who run for too high of an office too quickly. If that makes any sense whatsoever. We've had some wonderful people run for Congress and Senate and then walk away frustrated because of all the steps that you need to take to build a political organization over time. Indeed. So I applaud your willingness to get involved in the, I'll call it the grunt level, the nuts and bolts of government, because from that is where great political careers are built. Do you have any fundraising events coming up or any events? And are you going to be debating your opposition?
Yeah, we're hoping to have some meet and greets in the neighborhood, and not with the specific intent of fundraising, but to get the word out. And if fundraising happens at that time, that's great. I'm focusing on individual fundraising. I'm not receiving, far-flung $1,000 donations that are kind of tied to, special interests like teachers' unions or whatever. But we're hoping to raise a little bit more individual funds and make some more lawn signs, make some more pamphlets, and get out there.
Well, listen, thanks for coming on. Again, your website.
EthanGiles.com.
Great. Well, folks, another great week. Next week, we've got Rob Paquin from the Rhode Island Republican Party coming on with a couple of his legislative candidates. Again, coalitionradio.us, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio. Dave, thanks again for coming in.
My pleasure, Pat, as always.
All right. Look for us on our blog. Dave, you're going to be contributing to that again soon, I hope?
I will.
All right. Listen, folks, have a great week. We'll see you next week. 2 weeks from now, special debate coming up. More about that on the web this week.